All right. Good morning. I'm Lauren Barker. I'm the CEO of Cape Cod Young Professionals, and we are here with Cindy Horgan of Cape Cod Children's Place and Ayanna Parrent of Be Free Coaching and Wellness to talk about an issue that we've heard you say is one of the biggest concerns or challenges that you're having during the COVID-19 pandemic and our challenges that we face here on Cape Cod. Through CCYP's current and ongoing community needs survey for the COVID-19 crisis, we're hearing that a lot of you are finding challenges with juggling and balancing working from home with your caregiving responsibilities, whether that be parents or taking care of other people in your family. How do you juggle and balance all these things that a lot of times just don't line up in terms of those responsibilities, specifically when you're all at home together, social distancing, staying at home. How do you manage? So I invited Cindy and Ayanna here to talk with us today. I'm gonna just ask them a few questions, see what kind of ideas and tips they have, and hopefully this will help anybody out there who is challenged with this issue. I know that I personally have experienced challenges with this, having two young kids at home. Ayanna, I think you as well have mentioned this has been an issue. So we will just have a little conversation here and see what we can shake out in the way of tips and help for people. So why don't we start with Cindy? I know in terms of this challenge and sort of balancing working from home and caregiving responsibilities, I know that Cape Cod Children's Place has been doing regular videos and has been in touch with parents and caregivers during this time. What are your thoughts on the fact that this is coming back on our survey as one of the biggest challenges young people and young caregivers are facing?
Well, I think it's important to realize that life as we know it completely went off the rails. And so not only did our children experience a disruption, but we have to acknowledge that we as parents and caregivers have experienced a huge disruption into what was our norm. And I think part of the challenge for us is realizing that we got to figure out how to get back on, and it's going to look very different. You know, where we had these typical predictable routines within our family, they look very different right now. And I think when we start to talk about navigating this period of time, the harsh reality is it should be a little difficult right now because we've not been here before. And so we have to, it's really about less is more and creating that predictability. You know, when I was preparing for this, I was thinking in a couple of ways. I was thinking of myself as a child. My parents owned a business. They weren't really successful, but they owned a business. And I so remember as a child that Thursdays was payroll day. And I knew that on payroll day, our kitchen table was covered with papers and we weren't really allowed to go into the kitchen. And so it was something that we became accustomed to as a family. And so I think of how we're making these changes within our family, and it's becoming our new norm. And I think what really needs to be recognized here is giving clear expectations of what this change is, why this looks like this. And then I thought even back to when my husband and I only had two little ones, he was working from home for a period of time. And the biggest adjustment was on me, not on the little ones. They knew when the door was closed, Dad was working. I saw no barrier between that door being closed, and it took quite a bit of work for us. And the best thing that happened was he got a job outside of the house, and we both realized that was the best thing that happened to us in one of many great things that happened to us in our journey. But it's the fact that we're struggling with the disruption that we too have not come to grips with. So I think I've answered that.
Yeah, so it's not so much the situation that we're in so much as that it's just so different from what we're used to. So establishing a routine of some kind, any kind. I know we see, especially in the early stages of when the pandemic really started to hit here in the States, I think parents were really inundated with a lot of expectations in terms of that scheduling and routine. And here's this color-coded chart that you can provide to your children every day, and timing and all of that. What would your perceptions or thoughts be on that sort of thing? Because I think the reality of trying to implement a routine, you mentioned less is more. So I'm curious to hear how you would define that.
Well, I think it's really important to know that clear expectations are really important. And so I am always such a proponent that routines means the world's predictable. And it's going to look a lot different depending on the ages of the children. So if you have school-age children or even pre-kindergarten children, they have a little bit more ability to understand sort of what that routine should look like. The rhythm for a really young child is that breakfast routine, that play routine, that all of those routines of the day. And not that you have to be tied to that calendar or that clock, but that it has that predictability happening. I think a really valuable tool right now for families, and I'm such a believer in this, is family meetings. And I don't know that you necessarily have to have this big chart and be, I always think about Yours, Mine, and Ours in that movie when all of these families and these kids came together and the bathroom was scheduled. But I think a family meeting says that today my job is I need to do payroll for my company. So in this block of time, this is what I'm doing my job. Often what I think has happened over time, especially with young children, is I question sometimes if they really know what our work is. We say we're going to work, we're going to our jobs. And I remember working in a shelter with teen moms one time, and my son was in preschool, and they did an interview of all the children. So I was working in a shelter with teen moms, supporting them. And when asked, my son clearly responded, and they said, "What does your mom do?" And he said, "She teaches teenagers how to have babies." And I know that I had to really understand how they perceived my world. And so I think family meetings are not necessarily big charts, but opportunities to sit down and identify what are the needs of the families, what are the needs of the individuals, and what are the expectations, and to be realistic and knowing that there's a beginning to my work and there's an end to my work, and giving it a measure. So when the clock says this, that's when my work is done. And so children really love boundaries. They love to know what the lines are. If we're clear with them, it guides them.
That's great. So I'm listening to you speak, and I think these are wonderful tips. I love the family meeting idea, especially when implemented as kind of a part of your routine. I want to, though, kind of look at some of the feedback that we've been hearing is just the pure sense of overwhelm, of stress, of anxiety, just all the challenges in that sense that parents and caregivers are facing right now. What does it look like? What does it look like when you don't even feel like you have the capacity to schedule a family meeting and stick to that routine? Ayanna, I know that you've been doing a lot of posts through Be Free and talking about managing emotions and how people are feeling and sort of acceptance of that. I know that many people are struggling to find balance right now and figure out how to juggle all those responsibilities that they have in a way that doesn't leave them feeling overwhelmed. What tips would you offer? You're in LICSW. I know you've done a lot of coaching and counseling. What would you say to people that are struggling with that?
Yeah, I was going to say, I was laughing at the in the beginning when you're saying all those calendars and all the charts and all the stuff. Like, oh my God, I was like, as a parent, I was like, ah, started like freaking out, like, oh my God. And now I have to make all these charts on top of like my job and running a studio and running a business. Like, what is this? And I'm in LICSW and I worked in school, so it's not like I don't have all that background. I have it all. In fact, I have every chart you could possibly imagine. But it's different when it's your own family, your own life, and you're trying to like manage it. So I just want to affirm anyone who felt overwhelmed during that time too. And again, I love the family meeting. We haven't done that, but then a little piece of me was like, shoot, now I got to go like find time to like organize all my 5 people or whatever. But I love that, so I wrote it down. So thank you for that, Cindy. That was great. So I think the piece we got to really be aware of, I think, as parents or just anyone dealing with this right now, is that the brain and the mind and the body are really super overwhelmed. So that's just like acknowledging that. I think that's what you were speaking to, is that's why I did that chat last week of, I was getting so many questions of like, I can't manage like any emotion feels here, you know, like we're used to dealing with emotions and having some kind of coping mechanism of like, oh, I'm sad and I'll just like manage that. But people are managing waves of like intense anger, sadness, frustration, overwhelm. It all feels like at a 10 because we've never dealt with this before. So the brain is on like a 10 all the time. So just again, acknowledging that that's totally like okay, and that giving ourselves some kind of break and forgiveness that that's our new normal for a little while. It took me about 2.5 weeks just to adjust to the fact that I had to understand what was happening. Like I didn't even make a schedule for my studio because I was just trying to figure out what was happening. Like we're in a pandemic, we can't touch people, like, and a lot of this is around like human nature that we're so used to. That's why it feels so strange. And especially for children too, for them to wrap their brain around I can't hug somebody is really, really different. So my point in saying that is just to acknowledge that it's like, it's okay to feel that way. I think what I was working with people a lot in the beginning too was like, there's a lot of like, I shouldn't feel this way, and how come I'm so overwhelmed, and why can't I do 10,000 things at once? Like, it's like, because you're not supposed to know how to do that. And so piecing out stuff, like separating it and then letting it be okay. Like for those first 2 weeks, I'm just trying to give personal examples because I just feel like it helps people a little bit, like to give myself permission not to make a schedule, because I saw all these like yoga studios going online and like having these beautiful like DVR like videos and things and pricing out and new memberships, and like I'm still trying to like figure out a schedule that my kid can have breakfast and understand what the next step is. So just allowing the small, like you said, less is more. It's okay to not like, even, I mean, the business is going to be what it is, and then just letting, like, it's okay. I had to give myself permission as a parent and then as a business owner to step back, and to know that stepping back was actually doing something, that it was allowing myself to get my thoughts together, to get my family together, to take care of myself first, and then figure out what's next. And I know that everyone can't do that because they have like jobs that need them. But what I was also finding is that people weren't questioning their jobs. It's like, it's okay to ask for what you need, especially now in your job, because you're not going to be able to take care of yourself if you are then sort of strained in your own job. Like, you have to take care of yourself. You have to be number one. And just to ask for what you need in your job, even if it's a little chunk of time, like I need these 3 days to deal with this, and then I can deal with that. So it's sort of like chunking it out so that your brain doesn't feel like you're dealing with the whole world's pandemic at once, which I know is what it feels like. And just a couple other tips I wrote down that certainly helped me is, in the beginning, I know people were trying to get outside and do like family stuff all together, which is good. But I think carving out time for yourself is like more valuable than you will ever know as a parent. So even if it's just 10 minutes is what I was getting people to do. And then finding some kind of joy. So for a lot of the parents now, for homework, I have them dancing for 10 minutes by themselves. I know that sounds crazy, but like, or anything that like running or whatever, you know, that gets your heart rate up, gets your body moving, gets you back connected to yourself. It just gives your brain and space some time to then like really hear and deal with other pieces that are happening. It helps the overwhelm like more than you will ever know. Just getting that space and time. I was trying to have people meditate, but I like, that's my big thing is, helping people meditate, and that's like the key. But what happens when we really are in like trauma reaction right now? So I do a lot of trauma training and teaching, but when you're in active trauma, it's really hard for the brain to settle. And I know that part of meditation is teaching us that, but it's sometimes can be counterintuitive when you're fighting your brain so hard. So I've kind of let that go and just worked with people around just using your breath. Like, just don't worry about calming the mind because you get into this like rabbit race of like, what is happening? Just get the breath in the body, because the breath is really the one thing that makes your body know that it's safe. And then playing games with kids around breath and movement, I found is like, I'll do yoga with Britt. She's great, but I'll do it with Blessing sometimes with my daughter so that that will be our time because I know it's something that I can do and I can also enjoy, you know? So it's getting those times in together. So those were my initial thoughts. I know I said a lot.
That's great, Ayanna. I love the idea of trying to meet your own needs first and really putting that as a priority, because I think that that ends up getting pushed off so often as a secondary. Well, I've got all these other things that I need to worry about, and the whole family needs exercise, and the dog needs a walk, and the children have school, and the list goes on and on. But what you're saying is a manageable 5-10 minutes, use that time doing something that you enjoy. Cindy, I mean, on the subject of kind of meeting and caring for needs, children have many needs that need to be met as well. And under normal circumstances, that is challenging to juggle for parents and caregivers. What would your thoughts and tips be on that front?
I think it's so important to just go back to what was just said around where we are as the adults, sort of in that overrunning brain, that brain that is just really in that trauma place, that the practice of self-care, I think it's a real gift to our children for them to see us intentionally practice self-care. So when we say, mom is going to take her 10-minute moment, and that means that everybody needs to kind of figure this out, and I'm just going to have my cup of tea, and I'm going to put actually my headphones on and listen to my music. And really, I've been a firm believer of taking care of my own needs, and now I have adult children who make that a part of their day. So I see the practice really being a life-giving style. The other thing I think that is really important is when our children are dysregulated, I always use the analogy that they're taking the emotional temperature from us. And so when our children look like a hot mess, it's a real reflection on what we're all going through. And I think it's in those moments that we're like, you know what, it's an official family timeout. We've got to take a break right now in all of this. Two things really came to my mind too, is I do think it's important because this can feel like it's never going to end. We do know it's going to end, but we don't know how or what that will look like. And one of my mantras that I've often shared is that in this moment and in this moment of challenge, it's not my forever. And so I'll be able to get through that. And the other one that I think is really important when you're parenting as a team or co-parenting, and whether you're together in the same home or different homes, I can only control what I can control. So knowing the breath part of this day is really, if I gave any gift to anybody, it's truly what that breath feels like and what happens in the brain, and not only breath, but water, and put those two together. And I think it's a recipe for calm in the moment. The other thing that I'm realizing as we're talking, I get to drive into my job every day, and that's a half an hour of Cindy time, and it is all about me. But I also have a lot of wonderful people that have continued working with me through this time. I think we have a real responsibility of compassion as sort of employers or people that supervise or whatever our leadership role is. And what I've received the most valuable gifts is when some of the people working with me and through this have said, I'm overwhelmed and I need to take a personal moment here. We need to say, yes, you do, and what can I do to help you, and honor that. It hurts my heart when I'm hearing of people that feel that their job is at such risk. We have a real responsibility to show compassion at every level, and most importantly with ourselves. I really believe that. So I don't even know if I've answered the question, but I went on a rant.
Yeah, absolutely you did. I think the mantra is something that, if you think about it, at first it sounds a little silly. I've found it to be so helpful to me over the years, because I think if you already have a tendency toward anxious thinking, or even if you don't, right now is such a time of heightened anxiety that you need to give your mind something to focus on. and it should probably be something positive. If you can, I think as much as possible to sort of shift that. But I want to go back to what you were saying, Cindy, about really it's expectations and the feeling of pressure that you're not doing enough or being productive in the way that you might expect yourself to be if you were working under normal circumstances. How do those expectations factor into what people might be feeling right now, whether it's expectations that they have of other people or that people have of them or that you have of yourself? What might that do to the experience that you're having right now?
I've often struggled with the world of social media because I feel like we've already set ourselves up for a nosedive because we're watching the virtual world prior to this. And geez, everybody's home is beautifully painted. And I look at all the different places, and I try to read the titles of the books behind the people when I'm watching a thing, and I'm like, are they really reading all of those? And so then I start to think, I'm falling behind here. What I know on the expectations, and one of the things that I started to sense in the very beginning of this place that we're in right now, is I thought, what are the gifts that are going to come from this? And one of them, I thought, we're going to receive balance. And I think that taking and realizing my best is my best, and I'm going to give it my best. And if it's not enough, that's who I am. And I think that we have to give ourselves permission to be real. And I think there's nothing greater. One of my other mantras is mistakes or opportunities to learn. And I'm not looking at when we're not good enough, but I'm looking at when I am thinking I'm not good enough, where do I want to grow? And if that's not a place I want to grow, we have an opportunity now to say that's just not something that is part of my value system. I heard a phrase the other day that says we need to sort of balance our values with our vulnerabilities. And my value is to be a whole person, to be present to my partner, to my children, to do my best at my job, but to have healthiness in my life. My vulnerability is my fear is that I'm not good enough. And that's exhausting. And so I just have to focus on my value. And so that's sort of how I think we have the expectations of ourselves. If I use this story often, and you may have heard it, but when my children were little, I wanted to be the mom. I wanted to be the greatest mom in the world. And I wanted everyone to say, oh, look at her, she's a great mom. And it was a holiday at school, and I went to bake the cookies. Now, I don't bake, but I was going to bake cookies that everybody would talk about for years, that they probably wouldn't have even eaten them. They would have saved them, honored them, would have been a holiday around them. And so I stayed up all night making these cookies, and my husband, who knew that I did not have the skills, said, I think you're really taking on more than you can handle. And I know I'm going to be well, it happened to be the day of the perfect storm, and some of you weren't even born yet, but it was winds everywhere. And as I walked into this school, so proud of what I had created, my cookies blew across the parking lot. And I went into the fetal position. I was beside myself. Now I was not going to be the mom. And a veteran mom, picked up the cookies, and she went and wiped it off. She goes, they only care about the frosting. And in that moment, I knew that my expectations of myself is I'm in charge of paper goods because I can do that. And so to be practical and know who I am and not try to be what I'm not. And that's how those expectations should be. So that's why I'm looking at the books behind everybody, but I'm not going to try to read them all. So
I love that story so much, Cindy. That's fantastic.
It made me feel so much better.
I know, me too.
I don't bake either, but I'll do paper goods.
there you go.
And now I'm going to feel good about it.
Yeah. And feel good about that. Yeah. I'm struck by something you said earlier too, when you're thinking about expectations. You mentioned that, what we're going through right now, we're experiencing an active trauma. It's a disruption unlike anything that most of us have ever seen in our lifetimes. Maybe, for us that are in our 30s and 40s, maybe our grandparents have told us stories. I've certainly been listening more attentively to my elders and my family, about the stories that they want to share right now. because they've been through things like this, but we haven't. And how do those expectations that we pile on for ourselves and for others, you know, during a time like this, when we are actively experiencing something so huge, you know, what do we need to be thinking about with the expectations other than just scaling it back? What if that feels not possible? What if we feel that we can't have less expectations than we already do? I don't know, it's kind of an abstract question, but what are your thoughts?
You know, I think the reflection of what our children are telling us. You know, if I often use when I'm trying to help families understand balance, and I talk about we have bought into the world where we bought into the philosophy, which is just a myth, that the busier children are, the better they are. And so we have become accustomed that we've got them signed up for everything and they're doing 2 or 3 activities a day because we never want them to have a bored moment, because then, you know, they'll probably end up in jail. And we bought into that idea. And I say to parents, if you are driving around white knuckling it, look in the back seat. And we've become an anxious world. We've become an anxiety driven world, not by, you know, there's anxiety that is really out there, but a lot of it is treatable because we've bought into this idea that we always have to be getting better to the next place. And when I talk about that we have an opportunity here to look at balance in our life, I think for those that are still white knuckling it and they're exhausted, they really need to do almost a self inventory. What do I really need versus what I want? And I do think that's the place we need to come to. What is it that my family needs versus what we want? And less is more.
What are your thoughts, Ayanna? I know older kids too have their own challenges right now. I'm struck by, you know, what you're saying, Cindy. I think the students who can't, for example, have their graduation this year, or their, you know, play that they were going to be part of, or, you know, that there's so many activities that they're pulled to, and there's a real sense of loss, I think, when those are gone. And I think a lot of times we as adults have that same situation going on. You know, Ayanna, have you encountered this in your work, and what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts as we were all talking, and I think like one of the main ones I think coming up for parents too is guilt and judgment. So that, and I worked with people, with parents around that before this came up, but this triggered that in like a whole new way, because the expectations for themselves somehow got higher. The shame and the guilt got higher because they couldn't meet the expectation, because of the expectation of what the pandemic learning or parenting was like unrealistic. So I think like letting some of that shame and that judgment go, and again, less is more is like got to be the whole mantra for this whole thing, because there's just, you know, you can only do what you can do, and then you just got to let go of the rest and then love what you're able to do. So when I was working with people around, like, you know, the whole guilt of, well, I'm not doing this, and then I see these parents doing this, and then I can't do that, and, you know, their anxiety, like they can't even speak because they're like, you know, first it's the breath work, and then it's, you know, love what you're able to do, because if that's what you're able to do, that's great. Like, that's awesome. And the kid loves you no matter what. The kid just wants to be with you, and the kid just wants to know that you're safe. So that goes from 0 to, you know, 99 for all of us right now. We all are just looking for safety, security. Am I okay? Is this still, am I going to be okay before this, after this, in between? You know, and it's hard to say as a parent whether, you know, we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but we do know in this moment, if they're sitting with us, that there is love, there's connection, there's, you know, we have that. That's what we can control. So then back to the whole control thing, just letting ourselves know that that's okay. And I think just for people in general, I always tell people as a parent, I decided a long time ago sort of who I wanted to be as a parent. And this was kind of before, it was sort of as we were adopting my child, but I think taking that time to understand, particularly now, like, and who it is you want to be a parent, like, during this time in COVID. So you know that what it is that you have expectations for as a parent in general. And now let's just take a look at who do you want to be as a parent during this time, knowing that you're overwhelmed, knowing that you have to work, knowing that you have to take care of yourself. And then just kind of carve that out. And then be that. And just, but make it super, super simple. And then if you're not able to do even just that, still let that be okay. But just let that kind of be like your guide. And then just allow that to be what it is. And then just let go. I know I keep saying let go, but like really trying to judge yourself and having shame and guilt right now. Shame and guilt does nothing for your mind, body, and spirit. It just jacks it up. It just makes it like, it doesn't like it. It just really, all it is like self-doubt, that doesn't help. If you're really trying to parent, self-love is the best thing you can do. It really, really is. I mean, my kid mirrors me so much that like, I'll look at her and I'll be like, all right, I need to go spend some time with myself. Because she's the mirror of it. But also I was looking at, I went for a walk the other day and I was looking at the basketball courts and they're all like boarded up, and then there was a bunch of teenagers that came. There's 3 kids, and clearly they had been together. They all had masks on. They were all doing everything appropriate. They were just trying to be outside. They just wanted to play basketball. And I legit like started to cry because I was like, oh my God, the looks on their faces of like, I can't do this with my friends right now was like the loss. And, as an LICSW, I'm like, that moment is trauma. So I like overthink it, but really that is a loss right there, that they can't connect in the way that they're used to connecting. And that is just so allowing kids to just do what they can within, obviously the parameters that we're in, but just being able to create those opportunities as much as we can. And just as a parent, knowing that that's really hard. And so acting out and having behaviors right now are super normal because that's hard. That's, and for teenagers, not going to come home and say like, I feel lost right now because I couldn't play basketball with my friends. No, it's like they're going to toss something on the floor and eat something and then not do the dishes. And then, that's what that's going to look like. So it's just trying to know that there's always underneath the behaviors. And I keep telling my friends, because they're calling me, like, what do I do? It's okay to discipline. Like Cindy said, they're looking for you to know that there's safety during this time. So they're going to push your buttons in the first 2 weeks. Blessing, certainly my kid did this. She's 8. She certainly was pushing every button so that I would have to react and like do the thing that I do of giving her time and space in her room, of responding to make sure that, letting her know what is okay and not okay. She's just looking for structure to know that our world is still going to operate in the same way. So it's okay. Like some people were like coming back, like, well, they're dealing with all this other stuff and they can't see their friends, so I'm not going to discipline them. Oh no. No. You got to keep the same routine that you did before. Just because we're in this pandemic, they're going to push even higher to know that we are still going to take care of them. That's all that means. So, my friends were freaking out. I'm like, I just yelled at my kid. Really? It's totally fine. It's going to happen. And then being able to then talk to them, because I've lost it too. Like, so with this overwhelm time, you're not used to it. So I don't have my normal strategies of a parent of like cooling down like I can, where I was trying to before. And, and then losing it, but then having the conversation, like a real honest conversation. She gets it. Without overwhelming her too much, but just explaining to her, like, I'm sorry, I was in this moment, I was doing this and I was doing that, and, I overreacted. And that's so, and she just like loves when I do that. And she's like, I totally get, like, she gets it. And she's like, thank you. She loves that she can be a part of then helping me heal and, with whatever I'll have her help with a project so that she can feel like she's sort of repairing whatever moment it was. So that was a long-winded.
No. I think Cindy probably has something to add too, because I think, we do have to wrap up here in a second, but I want to allow Cindy too. You've been doing weekly chats on almost, I know that you've covered discipline and boundaries through those conversations. What would you add to that?
I guess what I would add is, again, I looked for the sort of the grace in this or the gifts in this. And one of the things that is happening naturally, and it's so critical for our children and our families, is we are really planting seeds of resilience. And some of the key factors in building resiliency in our children are flexibility. And we are having no choice but to learn how to do that. And some of us, that routines are different than rigid. And so routines are flow, rigid is control. We're learning how to be flexible, but we're also learning how to handle and manage and be okay with disappointment. I think, you know, I was talking with one of my children today, and there is a lot of loss around high school graduations. You know, this particular daughter of mine was scheduled to get married in August, and that looks like it's not going to happen. And I said to her, I said, I'm so grateful. And she said, why? And I said, because you're okay with this. And that is a real reflection on your relationship and the strength of your relationship, that we can move this date. And so some of it is really honoring the disappointment and being able to be in that moment and allowing, we spend a lot of energy trying to get our kids to go around it. And we have to learn how to go through these difficult times with them, and doing exactly what you said about connecting emotionally and being honest with my own emotions when I was overwhelmed and my voice got much louder than I like it to be. And I believe as parents, we're given a whole handful of mulligans, and we look for those do-overs and an opportunity. That's not how I wanted to do that. This is where it came from, and this is how I would like to do it again. What a gift to teach our children during that time. So those are my things on that.
I think it's awesome. And I think under typical circumstances, you know, a lot of us have been fortunate to learn a message that I think was not as prominent even when we were growing up, which is that you can accept when things are less than ideal, to just accept that for yourself and accept that for others, for your children. You know, a lot of what we have done with our kids is to say, just the reflection, to be a mirror. Gosh, you really seem like you're feeling like you're having a hard time right now, and not say anything else, and see what happens. And I think we need that as grown-ups sometimes too, for someone to just say, I see you. I see that this is tough. I agree, it's tough. So that was the hope in today. And I really have appreciated and you know, found a lot of great tips from both of you. Just personally, I hope that others will find this to be as helpful. I know that they will. You've each been hosting your own kind of weekly or regular video chats or Facebook Live events. So I encourage people to check those out. Be Free Coaching and Wellness and Cape Cod Children's Place, so where you can find those on their Facebook pages. Are there any other resources or you know, anything else that you would direct people to? Let's start with Ayanna.
I don't think so. I would just direct people as a final comment to use your breath as much as you can and let go of what you can't control.
Thank you. And Cindy?
I would just say, you know, our Facebook and our Cape Cod Children's Place, there are resources there. Take what you need and leave what you don't, and be kind to yourself. I really practice self-love.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much. Such great sources of knowledge and encouragement for our community during this time. I really appreciate you both and all that you're doing. And thank you very much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Sure.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Be well.
Everyone, leave your comments. If you have thoughts, questions that you want to submit, please feel free to reach out to us. Leave comments, questions in the thread below. Or Cindy and Ayanna have both said, please reach out to them directly if you have questions through their Facebook pages or other contact information. So thank you very much for watching, and take care, everybody.
Bye now.
Bye.